So that will be all from me. Thank you very much for being here. And I will pass the mic on to Molly and Austin.
Hello. Oh, it is such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I'm Molly Braverman. I use the pronouns she, her. I am coming to you from Lenni Lenape land, which is colonially known today as Philadelphia. And as a brief visual description, I have white skin, shoulder length, brown, kind of wavy hair. I have largish glasses on. I'm wearing a plaid blazer and I'm in front of a blue wall and a window. Just a brief opening remark. We are so thrilled to be here to share about our Sustainable Reopening Toolkit with you today. This toolkit contains highly actionable steps that we can use in different departments at all budget sizes in different ways. And this is part of the overall sustainability pie of different ways into this work. It complements advocacy work, divestment, and lots of other strategies. And I would love to pass the mic to Austin.
Thanks, Molly. Hi, everyone. My name is Austin Sora. I am a dancer and a member of the Broadway Green Alliance community as a green captain and as a co-author of the toolkit that we'll be talking about today. My pronouns are she, her, and for a visual description, I'm a woman of mixed race, Asian and Caucasian. I have light skin, long dark brown hair with some blonde highlights in it, and I'm wearing a yellow t-shirt with a kind of cream white background behind me. The land on which I'm currently sit is part of the ancient homeland and traditional territory of the Lenape people. And like Molly said, we're so excited to be here and to be chatting with you lovely people. I'll hand it back to you, Molly.
Awesome. So I forgot, I'm the director of the Broadway Green Alliance and also a working stage manager. I'm going to screen share here, but we've been having all kinds of screen share adventures as we practice. So all right. See, we might have gotten it out of the way. This is why we rehearse. Thank you for your patience. And I'm going to minimize those little gray box. All right. So as we mentioned, we are here on behalf of the Broadway Green Alliance, and I'm just going to briefly share a bit about who the BGA is. So we are a nonprofit that aims to inspire, educate, and motivate the entire theater community and our patrons to adopt environmentally friendlier practices. And we are all taking part in that action just by being here today. The BGA was publicly launched all the way back in 2008. We are an ad hoc committee of the Broadway League, and we are a fiscal program of Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. And you will recognize a certain someone in the photo here, backstage at Phantom. We do have an environmental partner, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and they partner with us and advise, and they did advise on the toolkit we're going to present here shortly. I'm going to pause for a moment at one of my favorite cartoons, which says, "My desire to be well-informed is currently at odds with my desire to remain sane." And this sentiment speaks to me frequently, depending on the news cycle, and it certainly represents how I feel sometimes when facing the climate crisis. It is overwhelming. And so at the BGA, we have 4 key principles to help us sort of break down this giant crisis into actionable paths forward. The first of our core principles, it is impossible to be green. You can only be greener. And what we mean by that is, as you saw in the rules, perfectionism is the enemy of progress right now. And so we need to abandon this idea of the perfect environmentalist. They don't exist. Just by existing here on this planet, we each have a carbon footprint. What we can do is strive to be more sustainable, greener, environmentally friendly tomorrow than we are today. And then strive to be even more so next month or next year, and just keep constantly reaching toward the concept of green. And not let the bigness of this disrupt our progress. Number 2, actions add up. And I love the picture we show here, which is our textile collection drive in Times Square a few years back. And you just see each person brought one of those bags or a few of those bags, and those add up. So our actions, small and big, all make a difference. It's the cumulative effect of our actions that are going to bring about the change we seek. Number 3, climate neutrality is insufficient. What we mean by this is climate neutrality is very important. We must reduce our carbon footprint personally, professionally, as an industry, as a globe. But there is so much legacy carbon already in the air that we actually simultaneously have to work to pull that legacy carbon out of the air and store it through natural and invented technologies that folks are working toward to do that. So we have to do both. And number 4, there is no climate justice without racial justice. As many of you are likely aware, the climate crisis does not impact us all equally. It disproportionately impacts fence line and frontline communities, lower income communities, and BIPOC communities. In fact, climate change is the great multiplier of existing social inequalities, and therefore it is incumbent upon all of us to work toward a just transition for all people. Great. So what on earth does this all have to do with theater? I love these photos. You'll see here in the first photo is Austin backstage at Phantom in costume, beautifully dancing and posing. And then there's me next to her backstage at the call desk at Wicked, not posing in a dance position, which is to everyone's benefit, getting ready to call the show there. And we're now going to share briefly. I think it's important to discuss that we all don't have to come to this work as, you know, considering ourselves even to be an environmentalist. I certainly didn't. I started, I was working on the Wicked tour as a stage manager, and I learned about the BGA and became a green captain, which is a volunteer position we'll dig into a little later. And through that work, I became empowered to start looking around me, looking at the impacts of the climate crisis in different communities we traveled to on tour, looking at the footprint that our own production had as we came to those places and those communities and were welcomed there. And quickly discovered that as a stage manager, I had a lot of tools at my disposal to impact change, whether it was backstage through recycling bins or programs and educational resource and educational moments, to just speaking with the local community and educating myself on the climate crisis. So that was a great experience. And again, you don't have to start or even be sitting here and say, yep, that's me. We all have a role to play given our roles in the theater. And as theater artists and theater lovers and makers, we have unique tools that we can use to combat the climate crisis. For example, we are storytellers, we're communicators. As we've mentioned, the climate crisis can feel overwhelming, and it's important to communicate about it in ways that inspire others to take action and ourselves. We are great at engendering empathy. We build community, which is critical in resilience building. And one of my favorites is we applaud. We applaud each other when we do something, when we take a first step or a 27th step, we're there to support each other, and that's critical. And now I'd love, Austin, if you would share how you found your way into this work.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Canada, and I grew up with a province-wide effort where we had weekly compost pickup. We had recycling bins next to every garbage can. And I came to New York for college, and I was a little bit in shock that, you know, these things that I had taken for granted weren't just practice everywhere. And so that kind of just opened my eyes a little bit. Not to say that Canada's perfect, it's far from it. But, and I remember I was, you know, it was my freshman year of college. I was on the bus with one of my really good friends, and she threw her gum wrapper out the window, and I said, "What are you doing? You can't do that." And she was like, "What do you mean? It's just a gum wrapper." And that was kind of the first time I ever realized that I cared about the environment or had any sort of passion for it. And my friend has since become a very avid environmentalist, and we've had a lot of great chats, and she jokes about that day and how she can't believe that she did that. But that was really the first moment when I thought, oh my gosh, I think I need to do something because I think I care. So that kind of sent me on this path, and to be connected with the BGA and to be able to tie this in with the theater community has been a gift. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And with that, keep.
Yeah. All right. So why us? Why now? So to answer the first question, I'm going to kind of reiterate what Molly said, in that the theater community is so uniquely equipped to tackle these issues, to tackle any social issue, really. As Molly said, we're storytellers, we encourage empathy, we are creative problem solvers, we have all the tools that we need to be able to tackle these problems. And yes, we're great at applauding. Um, and so, to answer your second question, why now? There are three reasons, and we're going to check that out on the next slide. So, the first reason is opportunity. So, we had an opportunity to redefine our priorities to promote social and environmental well being, to further integrate sustainable solutions into our reopening protocols. So the COVID shutdown gave us all a moment to pause and reflect on what's working and what's not. And more importantly, it gave us an opportunity to look ahead and to imagine a future that is something that we can all be proud of. So, kind of silver lining. Knowledge that prioritizing health and safety does not need to come at the expense of the environment. COVID-19 crisis shines a spotlight on the inextricable link between the health and safety of our people and our planet. So when the pandemic started, we all had kind of a knee-jerk response to be COVID safe at all costs. And we realize now, with more research and more scientific evidence, that we can prioritize the health of our people and the health of our planet at the same time, and the two, in fact, go hand in hand. So the third point on here is urgency to confront the challenges and interconnected crises that our industry faces, from the economic impact of COVID-19 to systemic racism to climate change. So these issues are all related, and in order to address one, we have to address them all. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So where do we start? And that is with this wonderful initiative that the BGA has put together, which is the Reduce, Reuse, Reopen Toolkit, Sustainable Solutions to Reopening Theater. So the BGA assembled a task force of about 20 leaders from within the Broadway and theater community. We met 3 times over Zoom in order to identify some problems and some opportunities to build a more sustainable future for the industry. It is a living document, and we will continue to change the recommendations as protocols change. And so we encourage you to let us know if we've missed anything, or if you have anything should be updated. It's a really community-driven project that we've taken on, and I'm really proud of what we were able to put together. So we're going to get into it, starting with our first section, which is environmental health and safety. So this is the first of 3 sections. All right, so starting with PPE. Molly and I were laughing about this yesterday because, a little over a year ago, I myself had no idea what PPE was. And now I have a hook by my door with my keys, and I have a hook next to it with my masks. And that's just life now. And I think we can all relate to that. So the first, this was a big green issue that has come up, since so much PPE is single use, causes a lot of waste, and is also a threat to wildlife. But since it needs to be worn in the workplace, we came up with a sustainable solution to provide company members with a set of 2 layered cloth reusable face masks to be cared for by each individual. And I'll add that most of our recommendations in the toolkit are to kind of address COVID, green solutions to the COVID issues that have arisen. So you'll notice that's kind of the theme of the toolkit. So if there are things that are left out that don't necessarily address those issues, that's why. All right, next slide.
Great. So thank you for addressing that. That was critical, Austin. And I want to share, as we talked about updating, we just this week updated our guide to include a recommendation for single-use PPE that is in a closed loop system. It's a new company that's come out that will actually provide a box for you to put backstage or wherever you are in your company, where folks can dispose of the single-use that PPE, and then they keep it in a closed loop and recycle it. So if you have to use single use, there are, again, more sustainable ways to use that. And though that link and all of the things we're talking about are available online in our PDF and interactive web toolkit for you to access. You don't have to memorize any of this. So cleaning, another thing that we all have done a lot more of in the past year and a half. I think with some whimsy back to March when I was washing my oranges. But now that we move toward reopening, we do know that our COVID-19 challenges, more frequent cleaning and disinfecting will be needed. Again, whether in our backstage spaces, of our props, of you name it. And we want to follow, we are obviously going to follow our CDC recommendations and health and safety recommendations. But what we did is we took that CDC list of recommended cleaners and cross-referenced it with Green Seal certified or Safer Choice standard products. And that list is available in the PDF so that, again, as we assume these new activities, we can do so in the most sustainable way possible, which helps our earth and is better for those using the products as well. Hygiene and personal sanitation. Another challenge is we're going to need to increase both of those things. And there are many commercial products out there, but a lot of them come in perhaps small bottles, single-use amounts, and one solution that we can do to make this more green is to install contactless solutions or buy in bulk and refill those smaller bottles, and when possible, purchase environmentally friendlier options. Great.
All right, so our next section is Backstage and Run of Show. Starting with, sorry, I think there's a teeny bit of a delay. Okay, stage and company management. So the call board was one major opportunity that we identified to cut back on paper waste. As many of you know, the call board is a central hub where important information is located, whether it be schedules or forms or memos, and we would love to cultivate an opt-out culture for digital communications and scripts. So this is kind of our go digital moment, as we like to call it. Right now, the norm is that everyone gets a paper copy, and if you want to opt out or opt into a digital version, you can ask to do that. And we want to kind of flip that norm on its head and recommend that everyone have a default digital copy. And if someone wants a hard copy, then they can request that. And that would go for any sort of forms you have to fill out in terms of vacation requests or house seat requests. And some theaters have actually started to incorporate a virtual portal for those types of forms. And they've been really successful so far. So it's nice to know that that's a practice that has actually been implemented and is working. So yeah, there's definitely a big opportunity to cut back on paper waste here. Thanks, Molly. All right, performers and musicians. So our first recommendation here is to green the pit. Install LED lighting in pit lights and use digital and musical scores. So this is going to cut down on electricity use and, again, paper waste. Our next point is to distribute personal bins for all company members to contain reusable items such as bottles, cutlery, dishware, and other items. And I'll just add that when I was on tour, I noticed that I was creating so much garbage because in every city that we got to, there would be so much use of single-use plastics because we're eating out all the time, living in a hotel, you're ordering takeout, and it was just really not great. And so I actually implemented the practice of traveling with my own cutlery and Tupperware and straws and a little sponge and dish soap, and I would wash it in my hotel room sink. And the difference that I saw in the amount of times that I had to take out my hotel room trash was incredible, the amount that cut back on waste. And I'm only one person, so to be able to do this on a larger scale can be really impactful. The next point is to skip stocking the green room with single-use supplies and instead provide each company member with their own set of reusable supplies for which they're personally responsible. So this is the same kind of idea. We are clearly big advocates for personal reusable items. And Molly has a really great story about this, about stocking your green room on a budget. So if Molly, did you want to share that?
Sure. So I know we've all worked at different budget sizes in theaters, and at the theater company I worked at recently, we did not have the budget to stock the green room with reusable items. That wasn't in the cards. So we came up with a solution that involved our audiences. And so we messaged to our audiences that we were looking to take this environmental step. So it was a great moment to communicate with our audiences about our mission and our values there. And we solicited donations of unwanted mugs and cups and silverware, which I think many of us can relate to having extras of sometimes lying around. And our audience responded beautifully. And within no time, we had stocked our green room at no cost to ourselves and through a really fun audience engagement effort.
I love that. That's incredible. And it's so great to know that it's been done and it was successful, and there's just so many wins to that. So I love it. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, scenic props and production management. Create a sustainable pre and post production plan. So Molly had a great point that creating a green strike plan at strike is too late. So it's important to be thinking ahead and to have a plan in place. The next point, if you're unable to store, reuse, or repurpose set pieces and props, you can donate them to schools, community groups, or thrift stores. I can guarantee that there is almost always someone looking for what you're getting rid of. So if you can connect with them in a way, it's incredible. Next point, look for FSC or SFI certification on lumber and paper, which ensures fiber came from sustainably managed forests or sources. As a dancer, I have to admit lumber was not in my wheelhouse. It was not my specialty, but I did look these up, and they're the gold standard in sustainably sourced lumber and paper, and they are the little green logo or the little tree logos that I see on wood, and I didn't know what that was, and now I do. So always learning. Consider miming props in the rehearsal room rather than creating rehearsal props. To clean props, spray each with a disinfectant rather than utilizing disposable wipes. And store prop food and other perishables in glass Tupperware or reusable containers, as Ziplocs can be very wasteful, especially if it's something that's thrown out every night and used again and again. So that is it for this slide. And Molly, I'll let you take it from here.
All right. I also want to acknowledge that because I am screen sharing, and we're having a little issue with that, I'm unable to read the chat live. So I look forward to reading what's happening in the chat when we are done. I'm not ignoring you. So lighting and sound. LED fixtures, something we're probably all familiar with. Many of us are starting to use them more and more on stage. And what we want to note there is, A, that's great. And also that not only does that save energy from the light itself, but LED lights produce less heat. And therefore we can cut back on HVAC cost and emissions, reduce our use of disposable gels, always a perk. So there's lots of additional benefits as well than just the electricity used by the one light fixture. And we encourage you not to forget about Backstage when it's time for renovations or changing out lights. Look to use LEDs for dressing room mirrors, work lights, and house lighting. You know, the lights that we actually keep on a lot more in our spaces than just the ones on stage. Employ reusable options for labels, zip ties, and other perishables. The folks on our task force who specialize in this, we're championing tie line because we can reuse it over and over. So look for those options. Batteries. We have moved into a rechargeable battery world in our industry. You know, about a decade ago, folks were really hesitant to use rechargeable batteries. They weren't tested and proven to last through the show, but now they are. We actually have a report on our website that talks about how wicked changed out their batteries to rechargeable. And as soon as everyone saw Alphabet made it to the end of defying gravity, no mics went out, the industry began to adopt that practice as well. That was one of the big examples at the time. And so look, when you are getting those rental packages, when you're putting that together, to include rechargeable batteries, again, from microphones, and also for things like headlamps and flashlights and other things that you're going to be using backstage. And this is a COVID one. Where possible, we know that shared microphones might be a challenge for a while. So if you are able to reduce the sharing of microphones, to reduce the waste in sanitizing and changing out windscreens, that's something to look to do. And again, when disinfecting is needed, just like with our props, look for a greener product that you can spray onto a cloth versus alcohol wipes, which are not biodegradable. Sometimes lets me change it that way. All right, wardrobe, hair, and makeup. Lots of things to do in these departments. A few we're going to highlight is using eco-friendly detergent. We have a list of those detergents again on our website as part of this toolkit. And when possible, when you're able to, washing with cold water. This next one is my favorite, which is, any of us who witness the amazing quick changes often see use of disposable bite lights, which, are in the dresser's mouth. So both hands are free and are great for quick changes. However, in our new world, I think, probably many of you share a reticence to put a flashlight in one's mouth ever again. So this is a great opportunity to get rid of those and replace them now with USB rechargeable headlamps or neck lights. So we can keep our hands free, but don't have to put anything in our mouth. So it's a double win. Next, promote recycling worn costume pieces, fabric scraps, leftover yardage by donating these to local arts organizations, schools, thrift stores. If you're in the New York regional area, Fab Scrap is a fantastic resource, and there are other local ones as well. And finally, recycling personal care and beauty items, which get used a lot in our industry. And there are often free specialty programs to recycle those. And we highlight TerraCycle as a great resource, as there's lots of specialty programs to recycle products that we use. Great.
All right, moving into our final section of the toolkit, operations, food, and hydration. So starting with cups and water bottles, this is our moment to debunk a myth. Many people believe that single-use containers are the more COVID-safe solution, but science has shown that using reusable items with basic hygiene practices is proven to be just as safe. So we recommend, again, using reusable items for cups and water bottles. All right, and for water, there's a lot of concern about shared water sources and that they are contaminated, and people are very hesitant. So one sustainable solution to kind of ease this fear is to opt for contactless water sources. And again, if this is not something that's in your budget, you can always utilize a Brita filter, like the just simple Brita jug with the filter, and just have a sort of disinfectant spray or wipe nearby. Though now we're realizing that the transmission rates through surfaces are not even that high, so that may not even be needed. But yeah, definitely Brita is your friend. All right. Cutlery. So I touched on this a little bit, sharing my experience on tour and how much reusable cutlery and Tupperware was able to cut down personally on my own waste creation. But the concern for contamination has led to a lot of single-use cutlery, similar to the PPE and the cups and everything. Really, it's really a theme. And so the recommendation here is similar: to use reusable utensils and to issue a personal set to each company member, and to have them responsible for maintaining them. All right. And finally, food and beverage. There's a concern about contamination is leading to increased single-serving and single-use food packaging. So same issue, different product. And so our sustainable solution is to reduce the supply of food and hospitality in rehearsal and backstage, and to encourage company members to bring in their own food and coffee in reusable containers. And Molly actually just shared with me that Equity currently requires packaged food and single-use cutlery for rehearsal and backstage. But the BGA is actually working with Equity right now to change those protocols based on research around transmission rates and other safety guidelines. So that's really exciting that the BGA and Equity are working so closely to ensure that the reopening is safe and also sustainable.
Thank you. Great. So we're looking to wrap up. I'm excited to get to the Q&A, but we do want to touch on more ways to get involved. Again, this is a menu of ways in, and by no means the full menu. There's lots of ways into this work. And one of them is through our Green Captain program. Austin is a Green Captain.
Yes, I know. I always get so excited when we get to this slide. I am a big fan of the Green Captain program, which is a network of BGA advocates who spearhead green initiatives, whether you are part of a company or a school or a union or a show. It looks different for everyone. There's lots of ways to get involved. As I had mentioned, I was the Green Captain on the Phantom of the Opera tour. And one of my main initiatives that I kind of spearheaded was the composting initiative. So in every city that we went to, I would look ahead of time to see where there was a compost drop-off site, and I would tell everyone in the company, and if it was easily accessible, I would let them know where it is. And if it wasn't, I would be responsible for collecting everyone's food at the end of the run and taking it to the drop-off site. And it was really great to see everyone coming together to support the initiative. I also did a similar thing with, sorry, there's dogs in the background. I did a similar thing with reusable plastic shopping bags, and we did a recycling drive to drop those off. So that was really neat. And what was interesting was that there was a couple people who would give me a little bit of a hard time every time I shared, like, this is the compost day, or they would always, give me a hard time. And then by the end of tour, they were on board and they were composting too. So it's really wonderful to see the company come together and to see the impact that you can make as a large group, and to be able to kind of spearhead that was really empowering. So I would encourage you, whether you are in school or part of a regional theater, or even just, part of a short contract, to reach out to Molly and Chrissy at the BGA and get involved. And it looks different for everyone, and you can really cater it to your strengths and your interests, and it goes a long way. So yeah, that's the Green Captain program.
That's great. And I will note as well, we do have currently 3 regional chapters. So those might even be closer to where you are sitting right now. We have one in Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Chicago, and they're growing. So if that's something you're interested in too, please do reach out. Great. And we're going to wrap up by just, another reminder about the power of our voices and our art in amplifying what we're doing, the crisis itself, and the solutions. Here you can see just a few different examples of folks we've collaborated with over the years. Climate Change Theater Action, they have their upcoming festival. Do check them out. A.Y. Young is an incredible performer who powers all of his tours only on renewable energy. Sergio Guadarrama is a fashion designer who only uses dead stock and sustainable materials to create gorgeous items. And we have Ariel Jacobs here, another one of our Green Captains at our collection event. So lots of different ways in, no matter what your favorite thing to do in the theater is, what your specialty is, there is a place to amplify those impacts. And we're going to leave you with an example of someone doing just that. It's a video of Lin-Manuel Miranda doing a ham for ham, using his art to talk about the environment.
Hey everybody, it's Seth Stewart, Lin-Man, with Hamilton. I'm the Green Captain for Broadway Green Alliance, giving you a special ham for ham. This is for Earth Day. We're gonna make history, save the planet, and do better things for the theater, for the world. Green.
Green, I'm like green, it needs to be green, but you know what I mean. I'm on the scene and I'm trying to save the earth one day at a time. Oh yeah, when I lay down these rhymes. Revolution, the revolution isn't American, it's global. I know I'm vocal, my vocal cords are always tired. That's alright, cause I'm not fired. Yeah, it's Earth Day, yeah, it's not my birthday, but we sip recyclable cups when we're thirsty. Oh yeah, and we use rechargeable batteries, and I say these things like I'm degrees. Oh yeah, Hamilton, we're trying to start the revolution slowly, like, cause it is Earth Day, like, so we try to conserve and reuse and reduce and recycle, and this is my title, I ain't giving it away. This is the ham for ham, oh damn, oh man, I can't believe I just slam a man half a gram, and no, I'm not in Amsterdam, but every paragraph I am Broadway Green, trying to save your life, trying to save the life of my kids and Sebastian, going faster, cause it's spinning and turning, yeah, we gotta stop the world from burning, Good luck with the lotto.
Excellent. And with that, we close. I'll put links in the chat as soon as I'm able to, but you can find us at broadwaygreen.com or follow us. We share lots of tips and like to amplify what you all are doing at Broadway Green Alliance. So I am going to stop this screen share, hopefully. No? Aha. Ooh. Always a gamble. It worked, hooray. So with that, we have time for questions or your thoughts, things that you're doing in your theaters or spaces towards sustainability. We'd love to hear them. So as we mentioned, you can use the raise hand function, and then we'll just go in that order, or if you don't want to speak aloud, you can put something in the chat. I'm catching up on the chat right now, so.
I saw that Lori mentioned anti-sewing squad, so I'm gonna have to check them out.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah, that looks great. We have a question from our host. Jump on in.
Hey, I was gonna wait to see if others have questions, but I'll just ask in the meantime so that people can come up with questions, brilliant questions. So like I also work with artists in Thailand as well, because I'm from Thailand, right? So I've been talking about like green stuff, and some lighting designers, they really resist using an LED instead of the traditional PAR, because they were like, oh, they're not the same, it's not of the same quality. So how do we go from there? I'm just looking for an insight when people are arguing that it's compromising artistic quality.
Sure. Austin, do you have any thoughts?
I will say that in the toolkit, we have a lot of recommendations of specific brands and products for a lot of our solutions. And I was going to ask Molly, do you know if the lighting is one of those things that we have identified?
We do have that on our website, actually. So yes, but I hear this concern, and it's valid. It's we like to use the things we know that we're familiar with. LED does produce a different quality of light. That said, we're a creative industry. And when I speak to folks who are hesitant to change our habits, first of all, I think it's important that we all acknowledge that it's hard and we don't have to do it all at once. Maybe it's starting with one light in your design, one fixture or one area, and building and seeing and getting creative. And I see we have a lighting designer on here who wants to speak to this. Please do jump in, Sabrina.
There we go. So there are a couple of thoughts on this. One is they've done a study where they actually took a large theater and metered everything electrical in the theater. And it turns out that it was actually the washing machines and dryers in the costume shop that used way more electricity than the stage lights, which are not on all the time or at full brightness. I think a lot of designers have moved to being very happy with LED lights, particularly for backlight, for lighting scenery, and have been traditionally more worried about lighting actors' faces with LED lights. However, of course, the lighting industry has been working on this, and ETC just released a brand new series of lights that have added sort of lime green and a red part of the spectrum, which greatly increases the feeling of the light, so it doesn't have that cold LED light feel that the beating LED fixtures used to have. So both the technology is moving in the right direction, and I think it behooves theaters to look at it turns out that the lights front of house and lobby areas and marquees use way more electricity than the actual stage lights when you actually meter it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Sabrina. I really appreciate that insight.
You're welcome.
Great. I see we have another question over here from Moxie Theater about the creative ways to design. I'll read it aloud for those who don't see the chat. I would love to see some discussions in the future about creative ways to design reusing scenic materials throughout the season and approaching design from a reuse perspective. Is this a conversation already out there? It is a conversation already out there, though obviously not in every space. And you know, I'm so excited that you are bringing this up and actually creating the conversation. I would like to shout out a group called the Sustainable Production Toolkit that addresses circular economy a lot in their work. Sandra Goldmark at Barnard is doing a lot of work around this. I will put a link in the chat to their guide, and they talk a lot about budgeting from a reuse perspective, which I think is incredibly insightful. As we all know, our budgets drive our seasons. And what I think is helpful there is there's some sample budgeting of ways to actually put a financial value to your stock or to, you know, the flats you build for you know, your fall show that you can then use again in the spring. And as soon as you add value to those, suddenly it becomes a different way to look at them as opposed to expendable. And so I think that's really helpful. And I will put that link in the chat. I don't know if anyone else on here has a thought on that, please do raise your hand or jump in. This, you know, takes all of us to accomplish this. So, all right. While I'm typing, Austin, would you read the next question?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a question from Monica. Any other tips on front of house / patron services sustainable practices? So I can go ahead and start answering this one. I know that for this particular toolkit, we were focusing on the more backstage and run of show kind of aspects of it, and that the front of house was a whole other situation to tackle. But I think, Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that there is another group kind of that is kind of addressing the front of house situation in terms of more sustainable solutions.
Yep, we actually, yeah, exactly right. We have a guide on our website under our resources page that specifically talks to front of house and patron services, but it is outside of this specific toolkit that we called our Backstage toolkit, as there's a lot to focus on. You know, and but you know, some of those tips are very similar to the tips that we include in this toolkit here about a go digital mentality, about how we can increase reusables in our patron services world. You know, one thing that I know we experimented with at the last theater company I was at was, you know, just like they do in you know, in some fancier places where you have an actual, you pay a little more for a reusable mug or glass. Ours were wine glasses, and you bring them back and you get a discount on that drink to try to incentivize reuse in the patron services space. That's one of countless examples. I'm sure that folks on this call have more. Great. I am just catching up here. Thank you for sharing the Padlet there in the chat. Are there other questions or other thoughts, other answers to the questions that have come up? If not, we will wrap up because I know we don't need to sit in Zoom longer than necessary. Great. Well, then I'm going to wrap us up. I will do so slowly. So if a question appears during that time, don't hesitate to jump in. But otherwise, we are very reachable. So if you have questions beyond this, please find us at broadwaygreen.com. You can reach both me and Austin there, and we're happy to speak further, brainstorm together. As we mentioned, we're in a collaborative field, and this is a problem that needs a collaborative approach. So thank you for the wrap up I see over here. And Austin, any final words?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here, and thank you to TCG for hosting this incredible event. It's so important, especially right now when we have the bandwidth to really address these issues. And I think that it's such good timing as we're, stepping into hopefully what will be a more sustainable and more equitable future for everyone. So yeah, just a big thank you for having us.
Thank you. I echo those words. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to TCG, to Devin for setting us up, to Bing for being our moderator. And thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, afternoon, conference, and take care, everyone.
Thank you.